Hello to all my ASL friends out there. This is your host, ID Jester. Thank you for watching my video and coming back and checking out our Advanced Squad Leader 15-minute rule video series. This is part 2, Every Man for Himself. We are going to talk about infantry units. These are, and understanding infantry units is one of the most important things because 98% of all ASL scenarios will have infantry units. Not all of the scenarios out there will have guns and tanks and vehicles and everything else, but I would say 99% of the scenarios out there will have infantry units, so understanding them and understanding what the numbers mean and everything is very, very important to understanding the advanced squad leader system. So, Part 2, Every Man for Himself, Infantry Units. Let's get into it right away. So the first thing here is we're talking about Section A of the rule book, and we are talking about subsection 1.11 all the way through 1.4, 1.6, sorry, 1.6. So we got a lot to cover. Let's go ahead and get started right away. So there's a lot of information, but the most important thing is to understand there are several different variants of infantry units out there. What I mean by that is there are single man counters. If we look at section 1.11, we are talking about single man counters. You will know they're a single man counter because they have one silhouette on the counter. One silhouette means it's a single man counter. They are either a hero or they are a leader, one or the other. That's what a single man counter represents. There are 3 variations of multi-man counters, or MMCs. Anytime we talk about MMCs, we're talking about multi-man counters. Basically, multi-man counter is any counter with more than one silhouette on it. There are 3 different kinds. The first kind is a squad. This is a full squad, and it's going to bear the silhouette of 3 men. 3 men on it. There is a half squad, which is basically half of a full squad, and it bears the silhouette of 2 men. And there are crews. Crews also have the silhouette of 2 men, but they are kneeling or bent over, kind of like positioned, crouching on the counter. These counters represent men that are specifically trained to perform a special operations with special weapons. They are crews that will man your guns and special weapons. It should be noted that there is a difference. There are two different kinds of crew counters. There's an infantry crew counter, and there is a dismounted vehicle crew counter. Your infantry crew counters are always going to be your elite troops, specifically trained to operate your special weapons, while your dismounted vehicle crew counters are not specifically trained. They are still considered a crew counter, but they are not elite units. So that should be noted that there are 2 different kinds of crew counters. There's only one kind of half squad. There's only one kind of squad, and there's 2 different kinds of single man counters, either a leader or a hero. So let's talk. Let's show you what is on the counters, and then we'll get into Vassal here a little bit more and show you exactly what we're talking about. Your personnel counter, the front of your counter, I'm just going to show you, kind of circle what we're talking about. All of them, your multi-man counters are going to have a 3-digit number on the counter, and the far left digit is basically its firepower. It's firepower. That's how strong it is. Higher the number, the more damage it can cause to the enemy because it has more bullets, more guns, better training, etc., etc. It should be noted that right above and next to The firepower, if it has a number there, that's going to be its smoke placement exponent. It's basically, that's a chance it's going to be able to throw smoke out of it. And also, if it's underlined, if the firepower is underlined, that means it has assault fire capabilities. These are all things we're going to talk about again in different episodes and stuff. But this is going to be just a broad overview of the information on the counter. The next number, the middle number, is its range, how far it can shoot. So in this case, you see it has a range of 3. And if the 3 is underlined, that means it has spraying fire capabilities. Basically, spray fire, for those of you who don't know, is basically a unit's able to attack 2 hexes that are adjacent to one another up to a certain range, basically, instead of just firing at 1 hex. And last but not least, the third and last number on the counter is one of the most important, is its morale. This is how strong mentally, its training, its physical resistance. Basically, it shows its overall capabilities of performing well on the battlefield. And of course, if it's underlined, that means it has something special as well, and that means it's an ELR of 5, which is important in certain scenarios. It shows whether or not the unit's going to, when it fails its morale, whether it's going to become a less qualified unit or a less good unit. And last but not least, in the top right-hand corner, is going to be its class. And in this case, an E stands for elite. It might have a number 1 in the corner, number 2, etc. And the back of the counter, each of the back of the counters, there's going to be a number in the bottom right-hand corner. That is going to be its broken morale, which most likely will be different than the front of the counter, depending on the nationality you place. It might be the same or it might be different. In this case, it is the same, 8. And also, you notice that this one has a box around it. The box represents that it has self-rallying capabilities, which means it can rally itself. It doesn't need a leader there to help it rally. And in the top left-hand corner, it has a BPV value, and it also has an identity on the counter. Identities can be going to be letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, so you can keep track of different units that might have some special capabilities, or for whatever reason you might need to keep track of that information, specifically that unit. So let's go into our wonderful Vassal module. Again, you can get this at vassalengine.org. Definitely download it. It is a great resource for you to have. Definitely support them. Donate some money to the Vassal organization. We can look, I've just thrown out some counters here onto the battlefield, just randomly, as you can see. Just to kind of show you how easy it can be to identify different units. As you can see here, we have, it should be noted that each different nationality is a different color. So in this case, in the Vassal module and in the board game version of ASL, German is light blue. Russian is kind of this orangish color. The United States is this light green. We can talk about British, which is like a tan color. French, which is a blue, a dark blue color. So there are multiple different colors for representing the different nationalities. It should also be noted that each of the different nationalities have different stats for their units. So if we look at the German units here, in say, oops, let me zoom up a little bit here. What hex is this? ABC, so C1 here. We have an E unit, which is an elite. And we also have one in C2, and this elite happens to have a circle around it, and we also have one in C3, which has a box around it. Basically, the difference between the E without the circle and without the square is basically they are different elite units. They are all considered elite. There's nothing special about this elite as opposed to this elite. It's just they wanted a way to classify different elite kind of units. So whether it has a box around it, a circle around it, or it doesn't have anything around it, it's still an elite unit. The box and circle, like I said, just represent that it is of elite status. You can compare that with the Russian. You can see that the Russians also have an E, and they have a box E, but you notice they do not have a circle E. So there are only two different kind of elite Russian units. If we look broad view, and we just bring up the Russians, you can see here in the squads, the elites here for the Russians are 628, which again, 6 firepower, 2 range, 8 morale. And they have another elite, which is a 4 firepower, 5 range, and 8 morale. Then they have 2 different kind of first line units. And so the different classifications go elite, which is the best of the best. Then you have your first line units, which are, so the elites would be the best of the best, followed by first line units. And you can see that they have a 1. Russians here, they have 2 different kinds of first line units. And they do not have a second line unit. You notice they do not have a second line unit. So once they go from first line, they go down to C. C is basically a conscript unit. We compare that to the Germans. The Germans have 3 different kinds of elite units. They have, let's go to the Germans here. Let's go to the squads. So they have 3 different kind of elite units. They also have a first line unit. They have a second line unit, and they have a conscript unit. We talked earlier about the different squads. This is the 228, is the elite squads that you will use to operate your special weapons. And then if you have a crew that survives a tank attack, and exit the vehicle, they're going to get this counter, which is a 127 counter. And again, some of these numbers might be different for the different nationalities. But there are, like I was mentioning earlier, there are 2 different kind of crew counters. There's an elite, special unit, and then there's the regular tank crew unit. If we look at the rest of these units here, you can see that the reason you keep track of the different units is because throughout the scenario, some of the units, depending on the scenario and what the dice roll happens, some of these units can become better quality or they can lower in quality. So a first line unit that lowers in quality is going to go down to a second line unit. And a second line unit that lowers in quality, you go to a conscript. And of course, you go the opposite way up the chain. So if you have a conscript and he becomes battle hardened, which again we'll talk about in another episode, he would go from conscript to a second line unit. And if the second line unit battle hardened, he would go to a first line unit. And a first line unit would go to an elite. And there are rules as to which unit you will upgrade to or downgrade to. Based on if you have multiple. For example, the German first line would go to a second line unit, and the second line unit would upgrade to the first line unit. But if they had multiple first line units and multiple second line units, there are rules which we'll talk about in another video about which one they would upgrade into. You can tell that these are all full squad units because they have 3 silhouettes on them. Again, you can see the numbers and the underlines, and remember the little number next to the firepower is the smoke component, whether or not they have smoke capabilities. So this conscript you can see is just a 4 firepower. It doesn't have any smoke capabilities, and it's not underlined, as opposed to, say, the first line unit here, who has 1 smoke component, and it is also not underlined. But you can see that each of the different units can play different parts of the role of the roles of the scenario for your units. We have single man counter here. Here's a 9-1, and it should be noted that it is a -1 and not a dash. It's not 9-1. It is a -1. In ASL, you always want to roll low. So having a -1 is good for you because it subtracts 1 to your dice roll. So if you roll 2d6 and you roll a 5, your leader is going to subtract 1 for your roll, and it might go from a 5 to a 4, which might get you a different result. So obviously having lower numbers, much, much better. We'll look at the American units here. Same thing. They have elites. They have a boxed elite. But again, they're still elites. The only difference is there are different kinds of elite units. We can see that this unit here, 2 silhouettes, we know that that's a half squad. It's not a crew because they're not bent over or doing something on the ground. And you can see over here that we've got a few of the crew units because they are bent over on the ground here. And of course we have a tank crew unit, and we can tell that because it's a 126 as opposed to a 227. So these would be the units here that you would have with your different gun units, and they would be the ones that are operating these guns to take care of these guns. Here is the German. They have a 228, which is their elite crew, and then they have a 127, which is their tank crew. And you can get in the Vassal Module, you can see that the different nationalities are play differently because they have different capabilities on their different kinds of units. And the scenario will tell you how many of each unit you're going to get. So again, that's kind of an overview of the personnel counters, the different kinds. We have crews, we have half squads, we have full squads, and of course we have single man counters. So thanks a lot for watching 15-minute rules. This is part 2. I am ID Jester. I appreciate all your thoughts, comments, and suggestions. Please leave them, and we'll talk to you soon.